So I have the great pleasure to introduce Melanie Swan as our next speaker. She is a philosopher and economic theorist at the New School of New York. She is the author of Blockchain, a Blueprint for a New Economy. Her education includes an MBA in finance from the Wharton School of University of Pennsylvania and a BA in French and economics in Georgetown University. She is a faculty member at the Singularity University, and I'm pleased to welcome Melanie Swan.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. How are you? Bonjour à tous. Je suis ravie de parler avec vous de la blockchain aujourd'hui. How many people here have heard something interesting so far today about the possibilities of blockchain? Everybody, fantastic. Well, hopefully we can extend that in this talk. The slides are available online at slideshare.net/labloga. As mentioned, I'm at the New School University in New York. I wrote a book about the theoretical possibilities of blockchain in 2015 to inspire us to build this world. The agenda is very straightforward. I'd like to talk about what is blockchain, what's happening now, and what the future might hold. The thesis I propose to you is that blockchain is revolutionary. No other technology has the power to uplift 2 billion people out of poverty overnight with the intermediary-free remittances market, produce an orderly transition to the automation economy with humans and machines in collaboration, and transform the only sectors not yet re-engineered for the internet era, economics and governance. The larger context of blockchain is network computing, where so far we've seen two eras. Everything so far has been about the transfer of information over simple networks. And now we're starting a whole new era of the transfer of value over smart networks. Blockchain is software. In the picture here, it's just like SMTP is the software protocol that tells the web how to send email. Blockchain is a software protocol that tells the web how to send money. So just like PayPal, blockchain is a digital payment system. It's also a form of EDI, or a VPN, allowing the secure transfer of information. Sort of like a giant transaction ledger, a Google spreadsheet on the web, for the permanent internet-based ledger of recording secure transfer of assets, like money or information, computationally, not requiring a human or institutional intermediary. The blockchain revolution is just beginning. It took, as you know, 30 to 40 years for the internet, the initial information internet to roll out. And now the money internet will take even longer, given the sensitivities with assets and money. So a number of talks today mentioned there's not necessarily any rush to the party. An astute contemplation of this kind of technology is a perfectly good course forward. With smart networks, we're pushing more complexity through the internet pipes. The elements transferred on smart networks are packets of information, rich information quanta increasingly modulated with different levels of information parameters. For example, the source of the information, its provenance, its remuneration properties, or its heat map interest level, for example, in quadratic voting systems. It's sort of like all information is becoming like a Creative Commons license with different kinds of parameters for what this information is and how it can be used. Smart networks. So initially, we have the information, transfer of information on simple networks, and now the transfer of cash, smart assets, and smart contracts on smart networks, transferring value, confirming identity, and registering preference, for example, in voting systems. In the more speculative farther future, there could be the automated distribution of smart resources and instantiation of smart entities. The reason that we need something like smart networks is because hierarchy does not scale. The next leapfrog technology may well be fintech. Just like cell phones over wireline public telephony networks, it doesn't make sense to build out brick and mortar banks to every last mile in the world in a world of digital finance. We take decentralized networks and digital finance together, and that gives us the power of the printing press in the venues of banking, finance, and economics. Some people call for access to credit and financial services as a basic human right, targeting the currently 4 billion underbanked worldwide. The implication of decentralized financial networks is long-tail economics and governance. We're born into one economic system, one governance system, and we take it for granted. We don't question it. But maybe one size does not fit all. So just like with eBay and Amazon, we could find that book or record that we really liked that was personally for us. And similarly now, in rethinking economics and governance, we can establish personalized banking, credit, finance services, and personalized governance services. Thus, we might be able to, in the crypto enlightenment, fulfill what was left open in the Renaissance enlightenment, as the philosopher Kant exhorted us to think autonomously, free of the dictates of external authority. We might thereby invent personalized governance services and rethink our relationship with authority. Similarly, in the economic venue, Hayek suggested that we have in our economies multiple currencies that compete for customer business. So how the blockchain works is that you would go to the web and download an e-wallet application. The e-wallet issues a public-private key combination pair to each user using PKI cryptography. Your public address is a 32-character alphanumeric code that is either appearing as a string or as a QR code. So if I wanted to send anyone money, I would scan the QR code with my wallet and submit the transaction. The software, the blockchain software on the internet, will confirm with my private key that I have access to those funds and transfer the funds. The key point would be that wallets hold keys, not money. In other words, the key to my access to controlling the ledger balance on the web in order to transfer funds to other parties. It's called a blockchain because transactions are batched. On the order right now, 2,000 transactions are in every Bitcoin block that's transferred. And every block, every subsequent block calls the last block. So transactions are in effect chained together on a giant ledger on the internet. Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer software network where anyone, including yourselves, can download and run the software to participate in providing the network for this service. Right now, there are on the order of 7,000 nodes worldwide running the full transaction ledger and updating it with all new transactions. Bitcoin mining is the software-based accounting function to record transactions. It's fee-based. How it works is that the network regularly issues random numbers, 32-character nonces, per specified cryptographic parameters. And any mining software and hardware rig, a specialized ASIC chip, makes guesses at what that new random number is on the order of 4 billion per second. So you can run a Bitcoin mining software on any machine that you have, but it's Pyrrhic. It wouldn't be helpful. You really need to have the specialized hardware ASIC, which is why mining takes place on very large server farms, mostly in China, right by the ASICs factory. So at random, one machine will make the right guess at the number, and that winning machine confirms all of the valid transactions and records them into the ledger and collects the rewards. then all of those other 7,000 nodes update, confirm the transactions as well, and update their copy of the ledger. The point is that this software system has this wasteful effort to deter malicious players. Only bona fide players will be participating in trying to guess for the rewards. Regarding the market size, while the US S&P 500 has a market cap of 19 trillion and Bitcoin's is 41 billion, 41 billion is on the order of a world's 100th largest country. A new kind of funding, pre-VC funding, called initial coin offerings in crowdfundings has been gaining increasing importance. There are hundreds of these going on all the time. And this is a particularly attractive fundraising mechanism. It's like a next generation of Kickstarter, and it's attractive because you can earn money for your project by issuing participation in your coin, in your money supply, without giving away equity stakes in your venture. Particularly notable was BATS last week, raising 36 million in under 30 seconds. This is notable, including because it's in the advertising industry, not just a fintech kind of a play, and it's attentional, identifying web attention on websites. In regard to other payment networks, Bitcoin is tiny, with 7 transactions per second being processed, as opposed to Visa, which processes 2,000 transactions per second. And so would need to scale to ever be sort of a global, very well adopted solution. Bitcoin processes $300 million worth of transactions per day, which is not insignificant, although small related to Visa's $18 billion worth of transactions processed per day. Scalability is absolutely the biggest issue with blockchain. The transactions per block have been increasing from 400 to 2,000 per block in just the last 3 years. And the current Bitcoin blockchain size limit is 1 megabyte. There are several change proposals that have been already discussed for several years, but nothing has been agreed upon yet. Even some new ones at the recent consensus conference in New York just 2 weeks ago, where miners and exchanges, or miners tend to favor emergent consensus, which is not having any limit on the block size, and exchanges and developers tend to favor SegWit, segregated witness, which is a 2 to 4 megabit expansion in the block size. In the diagram, you can look online anytime and see which proposal the miners favor, and indicating that they favor emergent consensus. Another solution is second layer solutions. So this would be batching transactions and posting them to the blockchain once a day, say like we do with general ledger in an accounting practice in our business. And so healthcare billing chains like Factum have already long been using a batched processing system to include actually less information in the blockchain itself. The issue is that Bitcoin is a democracy, so there are 5 different constituencies all trying to have their voice in how things are handled: the developers, miners, exchanges, wallets, and merchants. So it's more of a power struggle than actually a resolution of a technical issue. But it is expected that some sort of scalability solution is reached this summer. Some of the other risks, I talked about scalability. Mining centralization is another risk that people point to. This is the point that most of the mining operation is in China. And right now it's as a function of the ASICs factories are close to the mining operations. But it's not thought to be a long-term risk, as if Bitcoin and blockchain solutions turned out to really be a global payments processing system, there would need to be more of a distributed mining effort across the globe. 51% attacks are also not seen as particularly risky by technical participants. This threshold of being able to control 51% of the processing power of the blockchain is reached frequently, but never acted upon, because all of the players collusively want the system to perpetuate. Further, other participants note that even if there were a 51% attack, it could not be sustained, wallet balances could not be stolen, and it couldn't be changed how transactions are confirmed. So the actual benefit of being able to launch a 51% attack is perhaps muted. Other cybersecurity hacks, though, are a risk, and these are not related to the actual Bitcoin software, but rather the exchanges or other participants in the ecosystem. So your wallet might ask you to resubmit a transaction, for example, and that might be a risk because it might be software trying to spoof it to another address. And there are periodic hacks on exchanges. So overall, the thing to think about with the technical risks of blockchain is that most consumers will probably adopt when it's the time when Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America roll out e-wallets to customers, just like they did with ATMs, and not when users adopt them directly themselves. Perception risk is another concern, that perhaps blockchain is only the domain for drug dealers and Silk Road. However, this is a tiny portion of the overall activity, and just like the internet, it's used for good and evil. Regulatory risk, though, is more worrisome in that government regulation or changes in exchange rules can significantly alter the risk of participating in blockchain solutions. So the adoption right now is that certainly blockchain is a fintech play. Payments and financial services are implementing blockchain solutions for the immediate transfer of cash and for booking smart assets to unified ledgers. Other industries adopting blockchain solutions are logistics and supply chain, energy, IoT and healthcare, and more distantly, humanitarian organizations. For example, having title or housing registries of assets. If we think about how the blockchain automation economy might start to really take hold, we could consider that any complex transaction has two tiers of activities. Those are some that are related to human decision-making and others that are related to automatable processes that could be executed with a blockchain. So if you think about a real estate sale transaction or settling a health insurance billing claim or a corporate entity issuing commercial paper, many of those current tasks can be automated, especially with something like a blockchain, where the key functionality would be secure information exchange, asset confirmation and transfer, and automated coordination. Many things in the economy at this moment involve fleets. This could be drones or autonomous driving machines, robotics, clinical trial patients, cellular therapeutics, arbitrarily many fleets of items that can benefit from blockchain's automated secure coordination system with remuneration and tracking. In financial services, certainly the biggest application is a shared ledger. This means that assets could settle and clear instantaneously as opposed to in 3 or 7 days, as is the current system. In supply chain and logistics, asset transfer and customs clearing is a huge application. Understanding or confirming the provenance, the origin of assets and their materials, and tracing them throughout the supply chain of the trade line. In energy, automatic markets for load rebalancing, shifting quantized units of energy around the global energy market is a key blockchain operation. And in healthcare, electronic medical records. So for example, you might have a digital health wallet with your identity, your electronic medical record data, health insurance and payment information, where you could permission key access to that to different health providers, including, say, when you're traveling or in other emergency purposes. Another big healthcare application is health insurance billing chains, essentially an enhanced EDI version for the automated settling of billing insurance claims. Then in governance services, there have already been several blockchain weddings booked to either the Bitcoin or Ethereum blockchain. Different governments, for example, the state of Vermont has an RFP out for a land titling system that would be blockchain-based. Every different kind of legal document could be registered to a blockchain for a proof of existence. For example, you could hash and post your will to a blockchain for later confirmation when needed. Voting is an area with lots of potential applications. Quadratic voting has been achieving a lot of discussion lately about it's a more efficient kind of voting system and delegative democracy. In the humanitarian region, a refugee identity system is something that could be very important. I've been working with the UN on this recently, where how could we have a digital identity management system that doesn't depend on the user having an electronic wallet with them, but could otherwise have some kind of blockchain confirmable phrase or means of representing their identity. Also, in regard to aid, perhaps a better form of aid is not money, but rather development funds. So we could have smart contracts for literacy, sort of a Kiva for literacy. We might have open source FICO scores where we understand how they're derived, and decentralized credit bureaus. Finally, in the international finance area, tracking capital flight and budgeting with blockchains could help reduce government corruption. So the future applications, what we're really interested is perhaps not just a better horse, but what kind of car does this technology help us build? My thesis to you about blockchain smart networks is that any kind of complex operation in the future could be performed by a smart network. Some kind of technology like blockchain could be required. Some of the properties are the secure authentication of participants, the conduct of transactions, and the arbitrary automated coordination of arbitrarily many items, remuneration, tracking, and auditability. So some of the future tech problems that I think are solved with a mechanism like blockchains are, first of all, friendly AI. So we're worried about malicious AI taking over the world. But in reality, in the future, AI, just like other participants, will want to conduct operations over networks, over smart networks. And in order to have your transaction validated on a smart network, you need to be a bona fide player in good reputational standing. Otherwise, your transaction, access to resources or whatever you're trying to do, will not be confirmed. So I argue that blockchain smart networks are a response to how we might enforce friendly AI in the future. Even at minimum, we might have registries of deep thinkers, so there's some kind of auditability and accountability to their function. A second kind of application we might consider is the biocrypto economy. We might have on board our bodies fleets of medical nanorobots that take care of cancers or other kinds of preventive maintenance and cellular repair. We would want to track their activity for insurance and billing purposes, as well as just automated coordination of these million or billion items. A third kind of problem that blockchain smart networks might solve is runaway nanotech and synbio plagues. The idea would be that any kind of synthetic biologically engineered bugs or creatures would typically be signed by bona fide players, and even if they were maliciously generated plagues, their absence of signing would in fact be a mode of detectable origins. So the risk of a runaway nanotech cloud is somewhat diminished in a world of smart networks that track many things. Finally, blockchains in space could be indispensable to us in venues where it's inhospitable to humans, and we can have huge automated operations of terraforming, asteroid mining, and cargo tracking. But more immediately, we are wanting to reinvent economics and governance. We need smart networks, finally, for the secure value transfer of information, assets, money, and contracts. To do this, we think about what economics and finance really are, which is systems for organizing access to resources. Economics is typically concerned with measuring the past and about the present, and finance is about the future of assets with investing. In economics, the organizing assumption has been the production and consumption of scarce material goods. Economics is the access to producing and consuming goods. Finance is about, the organizing assumption is about the uncertain future value of assets, where finance is defined as access to capital, credit, and assets. If we're reinventing economics, we want to think about one of the main trends at the moment, which is technological unemployment. Technological unemployment is a situation where jobs are being outsourced to technology, where it's estimated that 50% of jobs may be at risk of automation in the next 20 years. Other economists wonder why, in fact, there are still so many jobs because we derive some other benefits from them. I argue, though, that a key blockchain economics challenge is an orderly transition to the automation economy, perhaps fulfilling a universal basic income initiative together with education credits via a blockchain system. To really survive in the abundance economics of the future, I think that the successful economies will focus on the production and consumption of intangible social goods in addition to that of material goods. What is really important to us is trust, recognition, freedom, belonging, and acknowledgement. In finance, I think that any asset can be experienced as a service. We've already moved in the consumption of music and video from having to own CDs and DVDs to music and video streaming. In transportation and living space with Uber and Airbnb, this is a substantial choice now as opposed to having to own the assets outright. And similarly, in the future, we can imagine securities as a service, a way to access the consumable benefits of the asset without the requirements of ownership. And this can work if there's enough trust in the system that the asset is available in the future. Just like I can call an Uber, I can trust that dividends from a stock might be available later. A further point regarding finance is the increased risk profile, though. More and more sectors of the economy are starting to trade like automatic markets. That means they're more tightly correlated and therefore risk is more concentrated. We have high-frequency trading hedge funds, real-time bidding advertising markets, automatic energy markets, automated logistics markets, and so everything starts to be automated, and we didn't really think about what that means from a risk concentration perspective. So we need to update our means of thinking about measuring and reacting to risk in a way that we haven't before, and I don't see anybody thinking about that yet. Overall, to shift to blockchain economics and finance, I think that some mind shifts are required. First, in economics, we'd want to move to abundance instead of scarcity, to a surety instead of insufficiency of assets in finance, in economics from a fulfillment to a fulfillment economy instead of a labor economy, in finance to access of asset benefits as opposed to ownership, in economics intangible assets instead of tangible goods, and in finance programmable risk instead of monolithic risk the way we have considered it. Concluding, for your own organization, how to create blockchain strategies with a leadership edge, one idea is to start or join an industry-wide consortium of how we're going to implement blockchain in our industry. Start looking at digital ledgers in your own business for revenue-generating opportunities. For example, banks are targeting a larger customer base through blockchain-based e-wallet solutions than they can with their brick-and-mortar branches. And on the cost-saving side, implementing digital ledgers internally for different kinds of accounting functions and quality assurance. I propose to you the thesis that blockchain technology is revolutionary. No other form of technology has the power to uplift 2 billion people out of poverty overnight with intermediary-free remittance, produce an orderly transition to the automation economy with humans and machines in collaboration, and transform the only sectors not yet re-engineered for the internet era, economics and governance. In conclusion, I think that blockchain is a fundamental information technology for secure value transfer over networks. For any asset registered in a cryptographic ledger, the whole internet becomes a VPN for its confirmation, assurity, and transfer. Blockchain allows us to reinvent economics and governance for the digital age. The long-tail structure of digital networks allows personalized economics and governance services. Smart networks are a new form of automated global information technology infrastructure for large-scale next-generation projects. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm aware that I'm standing between you and le vin, un verre de vin. Again, the slides are available online at slideshare.net/lablaga.
I love the talk. I was struck by the fact that taxation wasn't discussed. And I think what's interesting is we have a bunch of French people here, and Thomas Piketty wrote a great book called 21st Century Capital, in which he argued taxation of assets is really the only way for us to reduce the inequities between the rich and the poor. And I wanted to know who is thinking about that with respect to cryptocurrencies and what your thoughts are.
Thank you. So taxation would certainly fall under government regulation, and so far different governments have different ways of treating blockchain or Bitcoin cryptocurrency kinds of transactions, whether it's an investment asset or a currency, and they are starting to be more increasingly regulated and taxed. And so then in regard to the Piketty point about how the wealth distribution is wider than it's ever been and how might we start to cross the digital divide, so we would expect to see perhaps alternative participations in blockchain that could really counter the existing economic system in a plurality of economic systems, and that might start to address some of the digital divide issues. I can either bank with Chase or I can bank with Bitcoin. When those are really two solid options to me, then we can start to equate the digital divide.
I'd like to ask two questions about Bitcoins. The first is, what would be the influence of user-activated soft fork occurring in this summer? Sorry to ask this question. I'm not so familiar with this problem, but I heard it can solve a kind of a technical problem of a Bitcoin, but it can have a very huge impact to the market. So I'd like to ask the question. And the second question is about the scalability of Bitcoin. Watching the market price of Bitcoin, I think the volatility is quite large. So it's too large for us to use Bitcoin, as a normal currency like US dollars. So what I thought is, if it fluctuates, as it is, since the number of people using that currency, is not going to, increase. So, it's going to be just, it's just a financial product for speculation. So if so, it may not be scale as you described in the presentation. I'd like to know your opinion about this possibility.
Sure, happy to answer the market price volatility question. I didn't quite understand the user-activated software question. That it's more potential risk to the blockchain, or?
Right. So sorry. I also don't know much about this problem, but user-activated soft fork is a kind of a splitting the Bitcoin currency into a few different sub-currencies. But what I heard is it can decrease dramatically decrease the value of value of Bitcoins. That's what I heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I guess I'll take that one first. User-activated software. I haven't heard about it. I don't think it's a risk. The network is so large, and having transactions appropriately confirmed is part of the software mechanism. So it's very rare. It's very low risk that one party could really sort of take down the whole thing. So I don't think that doesn't sound like a risk I've heard about. In regard to market price volatility, yes, Bitcoin just reached 2,900 a couple of days ago. It had been at 800 last year, so maybe it's too volatile for a real currency, for example, if you need to pay rent in it or something like that. And so there are different wallet applications that do daily normalization or almost immediate conversion of Bitcoin to its fiat currency at that moment, and so that decreases the volatility. So if I'm paying $1,000 this month and next month, I don't need to worry about it because it's converted immediately. And so, for example, when I go to buy coffee at a merchant here in Berkeley, that BitPay will automatically convert it back to dollars. So that merchant, for example, is not at risk of the fluctuations in the market. And so most robust economic kinds of solutions do have a mechanism for immediate transfer to normalize the volatility risk of the currency. Certainly for speculators, they are enjoying speculating in Bitcoin. But because they're digital currencies, that's the beauty. They're immediately convertible to any other kind of product, either another cyber currency or to fiat.
Thank you for the information. Very forward-looking. What kind of key innovations or social trends would you be looking out for to deliver some of those more transformative impacts that you described?
Yeah, I think one thing that there's a lot of activity around is voting systems. So everybody has an idea of how a fairer mode of organizing governance in groups could be. So there's a lot of activity and potential implementation of different kinds of voting systems. Quadratic voting has been getting a lot of attention recently per some recently published papers. So that is one way where I argued that personalized governance systems, a long tail of governance systems, is a potential future trend that we might see, and where we could see it is in different kinds of voting systems. In terms of other things that I see it almost becomes boring in a sense of enterprise implementations. So company X has an announcement and they're doing an internal ledger system, and it almost has the tone of, oh, it's just another version of EDI or a VPN, or it's almost become boring in a sense, in a way that it's actually startling that these corporate giants are implementing blockchain solutions. So I think we get anesthetized from the excitement in the sector, and we actually don't notice these larger under-the-covers transformations that are going on in the economy. So those are two trends that I see around it. And I think that's the big engine of adoption is in the enterprise. It's not your friend using a crypto wallet or whatever, but it's really these enterprises completely re-engineering the way they have money and information exchanges with their trade partners.
What is quadratic voting?
Quadratic voting is, I'm not an expert in it, but there are some new white papers and published papers. And so it's argued to be a more efficient voting system, one of many more efficient voting systems which addresses the problem of the tyranny of the majority. And so it gives a weighted way for people who really care about an issue but are in the minority to have a say in the issue that settles it more substantially. So I was arguing that in smart networks, we start to see information packets modulated with more kinds of attributes, such as how much people care about this particular issue. And that is what is happening with something like quadratic voting, or there are some other voting systems based on PageRank, exactly the Google network mechanism, to indicate the relevance of issues to people. So many voting issues, the problem with voting is that there are many issues voted on that people don't really care about. And so it's not what's the resonance that's not captured is how salient is this issue for participants in the voting system. And that's something that quadratic voting attempts to address.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how you see governance services being personalized through blockchain. The examples that you mentioned there, like land registries and weddings and so on, they seem to be more about being more efficient or maybe more robust, but not necessarily personalized. So I wonder if you could.
Sure. So there's a company right here in San Francisco called Neighborly, neighbor.ly, that does community service microbonds. So it allows you to allocate your bond dollars on a micro basis. They have a $500 and $1,000 investment increment bond going in Cambridge, Massachusetts, under their program. So you can invest in bond issues you care about for your community. So this is a way of saying, well, I care about schools, or composting, or potholes, or better comms networks. So it gives this personalized resolution to individuals to put money in the specific issues that you care about in your community.
Thank you very much. Let's thank again our speaker.